My beloved child, something changed in the quietest possible way, and that is exactly why your soulmate did not understand it at first. There was no dramatic announcement, no single moment they could point to and say, "This is where everything became different." It began with something smaller, a conversation that lasted longer than expected, a familiar name appearing more often, a presence that slowly became part of their ordinary days. And now, from the outside, it may seem as though this person has somehow stolen your soulmate's heart. But stay with this carefully, because what appears obvious at first is not the whole story. Something important is waiting for you in the part your soulmate has not even fully understood yet. The strange thing is that your soulmate did not go searching for this connection. They were simply trying to continue with life, trying to quiet emotions they had carried for longer than they wanted to admit. This person arrived during a season when your soulmate was tired of questioning everything. They made things easy. They listened. They knew when to speak and when to stay silent. They offered attention without asking your soulmate to explain every complicated feeling underneath it. And for a little while, that simplicity felt comforting. Your soulmate began answering their messages more quickly. They began mentioning small details about their day. They laughed at things they had not laughed about in a long time. From a distance, it could look like the beginning of something powerful. Perhaps even something that had replaced what once existed between you. Yet beneath those ordinary moments, there was one detail your soulmate could not explain. Every time this new person made them feel understood, something inside them quietly compared that feeling to you. Not because they wanted to. Not because they were deliberately holding on. It simply happened. A phrase would be spoken, and your soulmate would remember the way you once said something completely different yet somehow more meaningful. A song would begin playing somewhere, and their thoughts would leave the room for a moment. A familiar kind of silence would fall between conversations, and suddenly they would remember the silence they once shared with you, the kind that did not need to be filled. That was when the first question appeared inside them: why does something new keep reminding me of something I thought I had already moved beyond? They ignored it. At least, they tried to. And here is where the story becomes more complicated than appearances suggest. This person did not enter your soulmate's life as an enemy. They were not plotting against you. They may not even understand the emotional history that still exists beneath your soulmate's calm exterior. In many ways, they simply became close to someone who was trying to discover what their own heart wanted. That is what makes the next part so revealing. Your soulmate began to wonder whether comfort and connection were actually the same thing. They had assumed that because conversations flowed easily, because this person was available, because there were fewer unanswered questions, perhaps this must be what moving forward was supposed to feel like. But one evening, during an otherwise ordinary conversation, something happened that disturbed that assumption, not in a frightening way, but in a deeply clarifying one. This person asked your soulmate a simple question: when was the last time you felt completely understood by someone? Your soulmate almost answered immediately. Then they stopped. Their expression changed. The room felt strangely still. Because the first person who entered their mind was not the person sitting in front of them. It was you. Don't skip this realization, because it did not suddenly erase everything your soulmate had been experiencing. Real emotions do not work that neatly. They can appreciate someone new and still carry unfinished feelings from somewhere deeper. They can smile in one moment and become reflective in the next. They can genuinely care about the person beside them while quietly discovering that part of their heart has never stopped asking a different question. Your soulmate gave a vague answer that night. They changed the subject. They acted normal. But later, when they were alone, they reached for their phone and did something they had not planned to do. They opened an old conversation connected to you. They did not send anything. They did not even scroll very far. They simply looked at the screen for a long moment, almost as though they were seeing their own history from a new distance. One message caught their attention. It was not the most romantic message. It was not dramatic. That was exactly why it affected them. It was something ordinary you had once said at precisely the right moment, something that had made them feel seen when they had been trying to hide how much they were carrying. Your soulmate read it once. Then again. And quietly, another realization arrived. Perhaps the heart does not always reveal its truth through excitement. Sometimes it reveals itself through what remains meaningful after time has passed. Something shifted inside them after that. The following day, the new person noticed. They asked why your soulmate seemed distracted. Your soulmate said they were simply tired, but that was only part of the truth. The real reason was that a comparison had begun that they could no longer control. Not a competition between two people, but a comparison between two versions of themselves. Who were they around this person? And who had they once been around you? With this new connection, they felt comfortable. But when they remembered you, they remembered intensity, vulnerability, unfinished conversations, and the strange feeling of being understood even when they had not explained themselves properly. That memory frightened them less than it used to. In fact, for the first time, they began wondering whether the difficulty between you had made them underestimate the depth of what was actually there. Here is the unexpected part: the person who seems to have stolen your soulmate's heart may have unintentionally forced your soulmate to finally understand it. Because sometimes you cannot recognize what a connection meant until another connection shows you what is different. Your soulmate had been measuring love by peace alone. Now they were beginning to understand that peace without emotional truth can still leave a quiet emptiness. They had been measuring compatibility by ease. Now they were wondering whether ease could ever replace the feeling of being deeply known. And they had been telling themselves that moving forward meant never looking back. Yet that old message on their phone had awakened a question they could no longer dismiss. What if looking back was not always about returning to the past? What if sometimes it was about finally understanding what the past had been trying to teach you? Stay till the end of this journey, because your soulmate's next discovery begins with something even more unexpected. The new person eventually said something about you without realizing how deeply it would land. They had heard your name before, perhaps casually, perhaps through a story your soulmate had once told when they were trying to make it sound unimportant. And one day, with no hidden intention, this person asked, "Do you still care about them?" Your soulmate went completely quiet. Not because they had no answer. Because the answer arrived too quickly. They cared. The realization did not come with fireworks. It came with a breath they could not hide, a pause that lasted slightly too long, and the sudden understanding that they had spent months trying to rename something that had never actually disappeared. They had called it memory. They had called it nostalgia. They had called it unfinished business. But now, sitting across from someone who had treated them kindly and offered them a genuine new beginning, your soulmate had to confront the possibility that part of their heart had remained emotionally connected to you all along. And strangely, this new person seemed to understand before your soulmate admitted anything. They did not become angry. They did not create a scene. They simply watched your soulmate carefully and said something that would echo in their mind long afterward: "You don't look like someone who has forgotten." That sentence stayed with them. Later that night, your soulmate walked slowly through their home, replaying everything. They remembered moments with this person. They remembered moments with you. They remembered why they had tried to move on in the first place. Then another truth began surfacing, one that changes the meaning of the title completely. This person may have captured your soulmate's attention. They may have brought warmth into a lonely season. They may even hold a real place in your soulmate's heart. But your soulmate is beginning to discover that giving someone a place in your heart is not the same as giving them the deepest part of it. And there is one memory involving you that they have avoided for a very specific reason. It is not painful in the way they once believed. It is powerful because it contains the moment your soulmate first realized that what existed between you was different from anything they had experienced before. Until now, they have refused to revisit that moment. Tonight, they finally do. And what they remember is about to force them to make a choice they never expected to face again. The memory returns more clearly than your soulmate expected. It is not some perfect scene preserved in golden light, and that is precisely why it reaches them so deeply. It was an ordinary moment between the two of you, something that might have seemed insignificant to anyone watching from the outside. Your soulmate had been carrying more inside than they were willing to say. They had smiled when they were expected to smile, answered questions with short replies, and pretended they were perfectly fine. But somehow, you noticed the difference. You did not force them to explain. You did not turn their silence into a problem that needed fixing. You simply stayed near enough for them to understand that they did not have to perform around you. And now, after all this time, that tiny memory comes back with surprising clarity. Your soulmate remembers the exact feeling of realizing, perhaps for the first time, that you could recognize something in them without demanding that they put it into words. They remember thinking, even if they never said it aloud, "How does this person see me so clearly?" That question once made them feel vulnerable. Tonight, it makes them understand something. The connection they shared with you was never powerful only because of attraction, excitement, or longing. It mattered because something in them felt recognized. And once your soulmate remembers that, everything happening with this new person begins to look slightly different. Do not misunderstand what is unfolding here. Your soulmate is not suddenly deciding that every new feeling was false. The kindness they received was real. The companionship was real. The moments of laughter were real. This person may genuinely have become important to them. Yet your soulmate is beginning to separate what they feel from what they assumed those feelings meant. There is a difference between someone helping you forget your loneliness and someone reaching a part of you that still remembers who you are beneath it. There is a difference between enjoying someone's presence and feeling as though your inner world has somehow become visible. Your soulmate had never examined that difference until now. And perhaps the most unexpected part is that this new person is the one indirectly forcing them to examine it. Something important is waiting for you in what happens next, because your soulmate does something that would have surprised even them a few days earlier. They place their phone beside them, sit quietly, and stop trying to decide who they are supposed to choose. Instead, they ask themselves a more honest question: what have I been avoiding? The answer does not arrive immediately. Their mind tries to move toward practical explanations. Timing was difficult. Communication became complicated. Too much remained unsaid. Maybe things happened exactly as they were supposed to happen. All of those thoughts have some truth inside them. But underneath those explanations is something much simpler. Your soulmate had been afraid that admitting the depth of their feelings for you would mean admitting how much those feelings could affect them. So instead of facing that vulnerability, they tried to make the connection smaller in their memory. They told themselves it was intense because the timing was strange. They told themselves they missed you because the ending had been incomplete. They told themselves another person could eventually create the same feeling under easier circumstances. And for a while, they almost believed it. Then this person came along and offered something genuinely easier. That should have answered everything. Instead, it created the question your soulmate can no longer escape. If ease was all they wanted, why were they still thinking about you? A few days later, another seemingly small moment deepens the mystery. Your soulmate is with this person again, somewhere ordinary, perhaps sharing coffee, sitting inside a parked car after a long conversation, or simply walking through a familiar place. The conversation turns toward the future. Nothing dramatic is said. This person casually describes something they would like to do one day: a trip, a home, a quiet routine, a life shared with someone they trust. Your soulmate listens. They even smile. Yet without warning, their imagination creates a picture that does not match the person speaking. They see you. The realization is so immediate that they almost become uncomfortable with themselves. They look away for a moment. They tell themselves it means nothing. But some thoughts arrive too naturally to be dismissed so easily. Their mind did not choose you because they were trying to sabotage the present. It chose you because somewhere inside them, the idea of the future had once become connected to your presence. And now that connection has resurfaced. Don't skip this part, because this is where your soulmate begins to understand why the new relationship felt so powerful in the beginning. This person arrived when your soulmate wanted proof that they could still feel something. After everything unresolved between you, they had begun questioning whether they were capable of opening up again. Then someone appeared who made conversation easy, attention consistent, and everyday life lighter. Your soulmate felt relief. They mistook some of that relief for certainty. They thought, maybe this is what I was supposed to find. But certainty built from relief can change once deeper emotions settle. And slowly, that is happening now. The newness is becoming familiar. The first excitement is becoming ordinary. And beneath that calm surface, your soulmate is discovering which feelings remain after novelty fades. Surprisingly, the thought of you remains. Not constantly. Not obsessively. Just consistently enough that they cannot keep calling it an accident. It appears when they hear something they wish they could tell you. It appears when they accomplish something small and imagine your reaction. It appears when they experience a difficult day and remember the way you once understood their silence. It even appears during happy moments, which confuses them most of all. Because they had assumed they would only remember you when they were lonely. Instead, sometimes they remember you precisely when they are happy, because some part of them still wants to share that happiness with you. That is when the emotional balance begins to change. Your soulmate becomes quieter around this new person. Not cold. Not distant in a cruel way. Simply more thoughtful. They begin noticing their own reactions instead of rushing past them. And the person beside them notices too. One evening, they ask your soulmate another question, softer this time. Are you sure your heart is really here? The words land differently now. Your soulmate does not immediately defend themselves. They do not insist that everything is fine. They simply stare down for a moment and breathe. The silence itself becomes an answer. The new person understands that something deeper is happening, and instead of turning it into conflict, they offer your soulmate something unexpected: honesty. They say, in essence, that affection cannot be forced into becoming a future simply because two people are kind to each other. They admit that they have sensed a part of your soulmate remaining somewhere else. And your soulmate hears those words with a mixture of gratitude and discomfort, because another person has now noticed what they were still trying to hide from themselves. Stay till the end, because this conversation changes more than your soulmate anticipated. For the first time, they speak about you without pretending that the connection meant less than it did. They do not reveal every detail. They do not romanticize everything that happened. They simply admit that you mattered. They admit that certain moments never left them. They admit that there were things they should have said differently, questions they should have answered more honestly, and feelings they buried because they did not know what to do with them. And when your soulmate finally says those things aloud, they hear their own truth in a new way. The new person listens quietly. Then they ask one final question: if you could speak to them without knowing what would happen afterward, what would you say? Your soulmate freezes again. This time the answer takes longer. Not because they have nothing to say, but because too many sentences arrive at once. They would tell you that silence did not mean indifference. They would tell you that moving forward never erased what happened. They would tell you there were moments when they almost reached out but stopped because they feared reopening something they did not know how to handle. They would tell you that meeting someone else taught them something they never expected: the heart does not always move in straight lines. Sometimes a new connection does not replace an old one. Sometimes it reveals why the old one was unique. Your soulmate does not say all of this aloud. Not yet. But their eyes say enough that the person across from them understands. And something surprising happens. Instead of holding tighter, this person gives your soulmate space. There is no dramatic confrontation. No one becomes the villain. They simply recognize that honesty matters more than pretending. That quiet kindness affects your soulmate deeply, because now there is nothing external to blame. No pressure. No argument. No one telling them what they should feel. They are left alone with their own heart. And when that happens, the truth becomes harder to avoid. Later that night, your soulmate returns to the old conversation on their phone. This time they scroll farther. They find photographs, fragments of conversations, ordinary jokes, pieces of a connection that once existed in real time rather than memory. But then they discover something they had forgotten completely, a message they typed long ago and never sent. Perhaps it remained in a note, an unfinished draft, or a screenshot they had saved without remembering why. The words are simple. They had written something like, "I wish I knew how to tell you what you actually mean to me." Your soulmate stares at that unfinished sentence for a long time. There it is, proof not of destiny, not of some guaranteed ending, but of something far more grounded and meaningful. They had been struggling to express their feelings long before this new person appeared. The silence between you had not happened because there was nothing there. It happened because there was too much they did not know how to say. Your soulmate reads the words again and realizes something they had spent a long time avoiding. The unfinished part of your connection was not merely what happened between you. It was what never happened. The conversation that never took place. The honesty that arrived too late in their mind. The question neither of you knew how to ask at the right moment. And suddenly the possibility of reaching out no longer feels like going backward. It feels like finishing a sentence that has remained open for far too long. Their thumb hovers over your name. For several seconds, they do nothing. They imagine every possible reaction. Maybe you have changed. Maybe your feelings have changed. Maybe the conversation would simply bring clarity rather than reunion. Your soulmate understands all of that. And strangely, this realization makes them calmer. They are no longer thinking only about getting a certain result. They are thinking about becoming honest. That distinction matters. Because when someone stops trying to control the outcome, they can finally say what they actually mean. Your soulmate closes the phone again, but not because they have decided against contacting you. They close it because they want to understand one more thing first. Why now? Why did this realization need another person to bring it to the surface? The answer begins forming slowly. Perhaps this person did not steal your soulmate's heart at all. Perhaps they held up a mirror to it. They showed your soulmate what companionship feels like without your history, what kindness feels like without unresolved longing, what closeness feels like when it begins from a completely different place. And through those comparisons, your soulmate finally saw the part of themselves that still responded differently to you. That does not automatically decide the future. But it changes everything about the present. Your soulmate can no longer pretend they do not know what they feel. And here comes the moment that opens the next chapter. The following morning, they wake earlier than usual. Their phone is beside them. Your name is still there. The unfinished draft is still there. But your soulmate does not send that old message. They begin writing something completely new. The first sentence is careful. The second is deleted. The third feels more honest. They stop, rewrite it, and then stare at the screen with their hearts suddenly much quieter than they expected. Because the message they are preparing is not the confession you might imagine. It begins with a question. A simple question that could reopen a door without demanding what lies beyond it. And just as your soulmate is about to decide whether to send it, something happens on their phone that they never expected, and it involves you. The notification appears before your soulmate can finish typing, and for one suspended second they simply stare at the screen. It is not some dramatic declaration from you. It is something smaller, almost ordinary, your name appearing through a familiar reminder, an old shared memory, or a simple digital trace that brings you suddenly into the present. Yet the timing unsettles them in the gentlest way, because they had just been wondering whether reaching out would be honest or merely emotional. Now your name is right there, and the question becomes impossible to ignore. Your soulmate sets the phone down, walks away, then returns moments later. They are trying not to turn coincidence into certainty. They know one notification does not decide anyone's future. But it does reveal something about their own reaction. Their heart did not feel trapped. It felt clear. That difference surprises them. For so long they imagined that thinking about you would only reopen confusion, yet this morning there is something calmer underneath it. They do not want to chase the past. They want to understand whether the two of you can finally have the conversation that never happened. Then something even more important becomes clear. Your soulmate thinks about the person who recently entered their life, the person who seemed to have stolen their heart, and gratitude quietly replaces confusion. Because without that connection, your soulmate might have continued avoiding these questions for much longer. This new person showed them that kindness can be real without automatically becoming forever. They showed them that caring for someone does not require pretending every feeling has the same depth. Most importantly, they gave your soulmate enough emotional distance to recognize what remained unfinished inside them. There is no villain in this realization. No one needs to lose for another person to matter. Sometimes a new chapter teaches you how to read an old one correctly. Don't skip what happens inside your soulmate next, because this is the moment their focus changes completely. They stop asking, "Who should I choose?" and begin asking, "What kind of person do I want to be?" Someone who hides difficult feelings until opportunities disappear? Someone who lets assumptions speak for them? Or someone willing to be honest while still respecting whatever answer comes back? That question gives them courage, not reckless courage, but quiet courage. The kind that does not demand a certain ending. Your soulmate opens the message again. They erase the dramatic words. They remove anything that could place pressure on you. Then they type something simple. Something that sounds like them. Something that leaves room for your truth as much as theirs. Perhaps it begins, "I've been thinking about something I should have said a long time ago." They read it once. Their finger hovers above the screen. And then they stop. Not because they have changed their mind. Because another realization arrives. If they contact you, they do not want it to be because another connection disappointed them. They do not want you to feel like a second choice or a memory they return to because something else failed. They want to speak to you only after they have been completely honest with the person currently standing beside them. That matters deeply to your soulmate now. So they make a different decision first. They arrange one more conversation with this person. And when they sit together again, the atmosphere is softer than expected. Your soulmate does not blame them. They do not make comparisons. They simply explain that something unresolved has surfaced and that continuing forward without acknowledging it would be unfair to everyone involved. The other person listens. There is disappointment, certainly, but there is also understanding. And then they say something your soulmate will remember for a long time. If you need to find out what that connection really meant, find out honestly. Those words remove the final excuse your soulmate had been holding. Stay till the end, because the next moment is not about choosing between two people. It is about choosing truth over avoidance. Later, your soulmate sits alone again. The room is quiet. The message to you is still waiting. This time they do not overthink every word. They simply write what they should have said much earlier. They tell you they have been reflecting. They admit there are things they never expressed properly. They do not promise an ending. They do not assume how you feel. They only ask whether, sometime, you would be open to talking. Then comes the longest pause of all. Their thumb rests above the button. One breath. Another. And finally, your soulmate sends the message. The screen becomes still. Nothing dramatic happens immediately. But something inside your soulmate does. For the first time in a long while, they feel relieved, not because they know what your answer will be, but because they finally stopped running from the question. And now the next chapter depends on something neither this person nor your soulmate can control. What you choose to do when that door quietly opens again.